Well, good morning, Art and Answers. Welcome to April 2026 tutorial. We've got a little bit different setup, if you notice. I got a new camera stand, which also is a light. And although you won't be seeing my face possibly during this video, you will be able to see what I'm doing, hopefully a little better. That was the inspiration for the new equipment. So let me know in the comments if you like it, what your suggestions are, what your thoughts are. So, pardon me. I've had a lot of illness this past month, so you will probably hear it in my voice. I'm on the mend though. So what I wanted to do this month with the theme of nature's harmony in me, you notice that the daily posts are a lot about getting outside, moving your body, appreciating the energy that is out there. And I hope that you have been doing that these couple weeks. And so the art itself was inspired by A Year of Light. There's an artist called Amandine Thomas, and she's a children's books illustrator, but she really had a wonderful idea that just kind of went right into what I'm doing with clearing out my mom's home, and it really got me kind of sentimental and back to my roots. And I thought it was the perfect time for me to share a little bit of who I am. I've been promising to explain a few things, and timing was just not right. But what she did and what got me inspired was she was doing something with her own found pieces of just treasures, and she called them tokens of joy. But everyone has them. Everyone has that little shell or a piece of broken glass or something that you have found in nature that reminded you of that time, that place, that person. And, I encourage you to do things like that. But if you know anything about science, and back in the 1900s, 1800s really, they made natural history posters. And you will see that with the example of the still life that I created from my found things that we're going to paint today. And I'm going to explain all those things to you. But this is a botanical that has been hanging in my mother's home my entire life. And I don't think, it doesn't have a year on it, but I know this is mid-1800s. So what artists would do is they would go and they would select a certain genus and species of something, and they would make the artwork. And this one is a botanical, but some of the other natural history posters were like the example that I showed you, were butterflies or complete categories of things. This one happens to be a rose compagnon, one of my mom's favorites, and it will get reframed and be put in a place of honor. But this was sort of some of the inspiration. I will go through and show you each of the items that I chose, and I'll explain to you, why they're important to me. And so what's nice about, something about this is they wrote the information here, and that was my original intention. But then I decided to do a fussy cut design with everything almost as a still life. So we might not have room to really put all the words. I may put that on the back, but I decided to create a name for this collection, and I called it Generational Wealth. Has nothing to do with money, has everything to do with what's really important in life, and that is remembering and honoring places and things and people that have been in your life. So I sketched out a few of the things, and I decided to do a background. I'm not going to put this down because my orchid is still not dry, but so actually I'm just going to move it. So the first things that I started, my parents were they were like the original naturalists, I guess. We always had things. We were always going out and doing things and collecting things. And so I grew up in Miami, Florida, and it's a tropical town. So we always had things that were ocean related. My father was quite a fisherman, and so we always had things like nets. And I just laid this down. You can see where I stenciled through it. I just laid it down, and with a makeup brush, I just stenciled it to create this design on the background. At some point, now remember, this is so many years ago, it wasn't heard of that you weren't allowed to collect some of these things. Nowadays, you are to leave things alone. You are to leave nothing but footprints wherever you go. So, but I have probably had this since I was about 10. And you can see in the past I've had kind of a little bit of gold glitter and whatever, but I've used it for a lot of decorating. I've used it for a lot of inspiration, but I decided I just got a new set of alcohol markers, which sort of heal themselves when you draw. And I decided that I would go ahead and put this on here with the alcohol marker so that when we put the fussy cut designs, it will be on top of this background. But something I saw that I thought was so interesting, if you are familiar with neurological art, it's just a way to settle your mind, soothe your soul. And when you draw things, you take this, what was a V there, and you round it out. If you will look at this sea fan in nature, every single connection is rounded out. It makes it more sturdy, so when it flows in the ocean, it has more of more to keep it together. And I thought this was interesting too. These little flecks almost look like fire, don't they? This is not a fire coral, but I just thought it was a really interesting design. Okay, so I'm going to move this, and we're going to start painting these different elements. Pardon me. Let me have a sip of something. So I just kind of sketched these things out. But you can use photos, you can trace the photo, you can try to sketch them out. There's lots of different ways to try to create your designs. But the first thing that we found, and this was at one point during my life, we moved to Kansas. And this is an Indian paint pot, which was found in Wichita, Kansas. It dates between the 14 and 1700s. I mean, again, This was not something that you are not allowed to harvest. But this is almost like, I'm going to say geode. I think that's the wrong word, but it was a completely round rock inside the soil of the side of a mountain. And you can look down in here, and it was filled with an iron oxide. So when the top was broken, Indians used these for their hieroglyphics, for making designs on their bodies, on their horses' bodies, on their clothing. They used it for pigment. And this one was red. They have almost every color, but this one was iron oxide, so it was red. I probably could get a little dirt off of it if I really tried. But we're going to look at that. Let's see, I'm going to put it here where you can see it while I paint it. And I'm going to do this particular one sort of a wet on wet, because we're going to have to go back and forth so that we can get the layers and textures and depth of color that we want. Now I did leave a little area of white there, and I'm going to dip into my, that is kind of a gray. I want it to be a little more ironish. I think you can, I'm not sure you can see that. Oh, here we go. All right, so it's a little bit more, got the orange kind of more in here where that iron oxide was. So they would break this stone open and mix it with a little water or a little tallow or something like that, and use it. Use their finger, use a brush, use whatever, and use it to create art. Again, I was about 4 when we found this. My father just always seemed to have the answers. He always seemed to know what things were, and he saw it from a distance, and he said, I think I see something I want to show you. And we went over, and it was kind of right at the edge. Like, there had been some construction, so it had been unearthed but not found. So my father was both of my parents were very well read, especially in the natural arts and sciences. So I'm just going to kind of, you notice I'm just kind of laying in just a little color, and we'll come back and add to that. All right. So the next thing, I don't have the example because it's in it's in a bird in the other room that was my father's first Christmas tree. And when my mom passed, my cat brought in a feather, and it was a female cardinal. And as you know, a lot of times people think they feel like their loved ones are near when you have a female cardinal. And so I said, oh, look at that. She brought me a little piece of my mama. So I'm going to just mix up, I'm going to put that brown because it's female. They always blend with their environment a little bit more so they don't bring attention to the babies. But there's a little bit of red tipped right on the end. And I'm going to let that kind of blend into that brown. I'm going to go back in with pen and ink and define these things a little bit more later. But sometimes that was just a little bit of comfort during a grieving time, right? ones that were truly cherished. I do have some agates, but these were the ones that were, the agates were valuable, you know, for my mother's father, my grandfather, they were not playthings. So, but these were playthings. We were allowed to play with them. And they're hand blown in Germany, 1850s to 1900. And they were called onion skins and swirls. Sulfides are the clear ones with little figures in them. And, you know, so this is soon to be 5 generations that just in my family that's going to be playing with these marbles. But they make such a beautiful visual display on the counter. So on our, you know, on our library shelf. So I'm going to put that right there. And let's pick 3 that we're going to do. So I kind of like this bright green one here. Again, because I want a swirl, I'm going to kind of put some color there. And I'm going to dip right in to this green. And we're going to kind of give it a swirl. Maybe a little bit more pigment there. These were actually hand blown and turned and polished. So pretty cool. I kind of like this these are kind of oval. When I drew them, I didn't draw them very round, but we're just going to have artistic license there. So, and I'm going to really dip into this yellow. I want it to be very pigmented. So put some more water in there. Usually about 30 seconds is enough to activate this where you can really get some good pigment. And I'm just going to keep dabbing that in. I will probably come in and do another layer on top of this just to brighten it up, because, you know, this is going to dry lighter than it ordinarily would. All right. Maybe that blue swirl there. That would be good. So I'm just going to put some water down in the design. And that's kind of a navy blue. Let's try this one. Sometimes I do like to, I like that, but I think it needs a little, needed a little bit more of a brighter blue to go with it. There we go. And I'm just kind of dabbing this on, and it's just sort of a puddle. I'm just going to let it dry. All right. So one of the favorite things that we would do on vacation, since we lived in a city, my family always wanted to go out into nature. And so we would get in the rivers, and where the water would come wash, it would create, all these little stones would get in the rocks, and it would create a big well, and it would just swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. And so the rocks inside those wells would get really soft. And this one is nice and smooth all the way around. Obviously, it probably just broke off a much larger rock and got down in that hole and started to wash around. But I remember my father, he would roll his blue jeans and bend over those big holes, and he would just bring those rocks out by the handfuls. But even though we harvested some things we should not have, they were always very careful about what it was. And, you know, we only got out one or or not at all. Sometimes we would just take a picture of it and then put it back. Certainly anything that was alive, we did that. But I got to see a lot of really fun things. And those mostly came from North Carolina, because we would drive real hard for a day, get to North Carolina, and just spend some time there. Tell me if you guys ever did that. And we would always go look for local places. Local places, especially to eat or whatever. We would stop and talk to, maybe a policeman and say, well, where's the best local food? And we would always go try it out. Of course, those days there wasn't really much of fast food, but there were some chains, some sit-down restaurant chains that we could have eaten at. But now this, I'm putting a little line on the bottom, giving it a little bit of weight, and I'm leaving a little bit at the top so the ink will actually go above where that color is. And we will have our little river rock. Okay. The next one, tell me if you've ever seen these or you've seen the plant that it grows on. But these are buckeyes. And I did not even realize until I started preparing this that they're called buckeyes because they look like deer eyes. I mean, actual deer eyes. And this one, you can feel them. The seed inside there is like, can you hear it? Kind of moving around inside there. But these are from Ohio, and they're from buckeye trees, Azalea glabra, and it's a symbol for the Buckeye State since 1840, since the presidential election, and it's considered a good luck charm. They're really smooth, so they're kind of a worry stone. It's really fun to just feel them. They always have like a little indentation here where your thumb can fit, but it's something that people carry for protection and for fortune. And believe it or not, Native Americans considered buckeyes a sacred protection, and they brought them good fortune and energy. So, but this has to be either found or gifted, because you cannot buy one, because then the power disappears. So it's funny how things like that come to be, So I'm going to mix kind of an ochre and a yellow. I don't know if you can see that, but that's going to be sort of the inside area there. Buckeye flowers, I'm sure you've seen them from the road. You may not have known what they were, but they're kind of a tall, spiky red, late in summer. It's noticeable because there's nothing else really blooming. And they have sort of a wide leaf. But I tend to notice them when I'm driving. So I'm going to go back down here to this stone. Sometimes you do this with watercolor. You pay attention to how wet the design is and what you're kind of wanting it to look like. So I wanted that to be a little more stippled. So So you notice these things had been more forest-like. And now we're going to kind of, let's skip the page. Now we're going to kind of go back to the things that my mom loved. So she just loved birds. I mean, she had an obsession with birding, and she would identify with binoculars and an Audubon field guide. And she even played tapes of their songs. So I listened to hours of things like that as I was growing up. But she provided everything that every species in her yard needed, from homes to their food. Their, like, bluebirds have to be 4 feet off the ground. They can't be too high. They can't be too low. It's just really interesting. And my dad used to build a lot of birdhouses. He did not build this one, but I thought this was a really interesting shape, and I thought it would blend nicely with this design. So I'm going to move this over where you can see it. And we're just going to kind of give this an overall color here. And I will come back and add more. So this one, the roof is really a little bit more olive, but we're going to go in here with this sort of, a little more turquoise than the example is. But we're going to go with it. And I'm going to go ahead and, just for make my life easier, I'm going to go ahead and go over the hole because it's going to be much darker from shadow. And the design elements here are also darker. So I'm just going to kind of put a little layer on there. We will come back, put some shadows. I'm going to leave a little bit of light there. Put some shadows and some ink and make that a little bit darker. I'm going to get some olive. And we're going to, this is almost like a patina, I think. So I'm going to kind of just gently put this in here. Again, there will be ink and shading added. But it seemed like we all had our things, you know. My mom was definitely the birder. My daddy was, gosh, he knew everything there was to know about trees. I don't know that I ever really got all that knowledge going, but and I love turf grasses and weeds. They make a long drive so much more interesting when you watch what's blooming when or whatever. Now see, I touched that house there, but you know what? That doesn't hurt my feelings. I'm gonna leave it just like that. It's fine. It's gonna make it look even a little more rustic, I think. And I'm gonna add some color here. Yeah, I like it. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and put some color in this fancy thing here, where the little perch is. We're just gonna do that. All right. So I'm gonna put that off to the side. Of course, you can't live near the coast without collecting a few shells. And tell me in the comments how many of you have you know, a whole jar full of beautiful shells that you've collected throughout your life. There's a starfish, and up here there is a seahorse. Obviously, I did not collect those. I purchased those, but I've had a change of heart about things like that. Now I don't participate in that. But this is a scallop, just like you go to the store and you eat scallops. That is what comes in there. This is a worm and a shark eye. So just beautiful shells. And over the years, I think these have just become my favorites. And I ended up doing this jar, and now I don't collect shells anymore. I have my favorites, and that's that. So I decided to just do that little scallop shell. And I may end up making a few more of them, but I'll move this. I just stood up. So the way this is oriented, the camera is on top, and unless I stand up, I cannot see any comments, but I see that Kathy's here, and I'm glad you're here. So I'm going to add a little bit, I think, of yellow to this. And maybe a little orange to get this shell color, that little scallop color. Here we go. Very nice. The more you mix color, the more it will just start to make sense to you. I was very excited. I got some pans yesterday, and I'm gonna mix up a bunch of custom colors in my palette, so you guys will start seeing some of those things. All right, so I've got, let me put some more there. So I've got kind of a puddle of color there, and I'm going to just lift some of this color up so that it's not quite so pigmented right at the edge. And we're going to add that little edge. This is a bivalve where there's two shells that come together like this. And when they swim like that. It's hilarious to watch them swim. We used to scallop and fish when we would go shrimping. Those little shrimp are crazy swimmers too. They're fun. Okay. All right. I may actually go back and make a few more shells just so I have them around. Okay. I want you to be thinking about, as we're doing all this, I want you to be thinking about the things that are around your house that you have collected that are truly, important to you. Truly make up something special. So, I was gonna explain to you too, and this doesn't have a lot to do with it, but it is the right color. So, I'm a 6th generation born in Miami, Florida, which is pretty unusual now. And my mother's father, so my grandfather, used to take my mom as a child down to the Miami River, and they would watch the Seminoles paddle up, in their dugout canoes, and they would come to Key Biscayne, which is where I ended up growing up, and they would trade beads. And they had glass, they would cure glass in fires in the soil, and they would make beads that looked like this color. And it was so fascinating. And she has a string of those that I don't know where they are. I haven't found it yet. But anyway, I know that she has that. But she was really fascinated with glass and colored glass. So this was one that I had found that she loved this color. Pardon me. And I just kind of mixed that up a little. I put a little more yellow in it. So it'd be a little more green than that. And we're just going to put some of that color in. That really needs a little more blue. It's just too green. That's better. Got a little drop on there. You have to be careful with watercolor paper not to scrub too much. See, I'm adding different color. Here we go. And I love how this top is, I don't know, it's like oxidized or something. I'm not sure why that happened, although it might have been near the ocean. And that may be why it looks like that. So I'm going to get a little bit of gray, and I'm going to mix that. And we're just going to kind of flick a few lines in here. There we go. Don't want too much. And that almost looks like it has sort of a little blue on it, doesn't it? So we're going to kind of, yeah, there we go. That makes it sort of blend with it, doesn't it? All right. So, you know, my parents were wildlife rehabilitators. It was just amazing. And every time I turned around, we had baby something that we were raising. And a lot of the excursions that we found, a lot of these things, sometimes we would take, my parents had this aluminum canoe. And we would get in that aluminum canoe and we would paddle across Biscayne Bay. They had large islands in the middle of the bay. And so one of my favorite animals that we raised was a raccoon named Butchie. He got to be gigantic, but he was, and he ended up back in the wild, so my parents were really particular about that. But one of my favorite things that he would do, he would love to get in that canoe, and he would get on the bow of the canoe with his nose sticking straight, and it reminded me of like George Washington crossing the Delaware. I think it was December 26, 1776, I'm pretty sure. And we would go over there, and Butchie would just work those islands and find all the stuff. It was just amazing. But he would get so excited that my dad would pick him up and throw him over the side of the canoe when we got real close to the island, and let him swim and work off some of that frustration, work off some of that excitement. But that was one of the ways that we were able to naturalize him, so that he would end up going back to nature and doing like he was supposed to, and have a little family and do all the things. So, so now, let's see. So now we're getting to my flower crown here. This is the one that I chose to use today. I really like this one. This one I made to wear when my daughter, she didn't know it, but we we were gonna go pick lavender, and my now son-in-law said, "Hey, can I go with you? I have something I want to ask her." And so we were like, "Well, sure, you can go." So I knew that this thing was going to happen, and I'm a photographer, so I'm always thinking ahead about things like that. And so I made us both a flower crown, and this is the one that I wore to pick that lavender. I'm doing this little bachelor button right here now. I'm going to add some purple to that. So that was a wonderful day. He knelt down to ask her to marry him, and he had the ring in his sock, and he couldn't get it out. It was wonderful, but my parents were they loved to do everything by hand. They lived slow and deep, I think. Things like my mom washed all of our clothes by hand, and she hung them to dry. There were such a thing as washing machine dryer, and other people had it, but they made a conscious decision that they didn't want that. So they just had a very different perspective on life. And she would pull weeds by hand, and my dad's thing was he liked to whistle. And so he would stand in the yard in the evening and water our St. Augustine grass with the hose. And he would whistle. And those are some of the things that I remember. But they taught me everything about everything natural, and every genus, every species, the details to make them thrive, and the things to keep them wild. It was important to them that we kept our animals and our things wild. Things were well kept, but they were still wild. And they taught me to document things. When I went to college, I became a naturalist and a botanist. And it's really shaped me. So the reason I say all that while I'm painting my flower crown is because in their perspective, everything was from God's world. And they taught me to be the daughter of the King. And that is why I wear my flower crown. It's just something that reminds me. And now that you know, it will remind you. So this one has a much more burgundy. I want more of a burgundy color here. There we go. So, you know, the purpose of this lesson is to reflect on your life and find the blessings that you've received from your collection. And think about the reasons why you have saved all these little things and for what purpose. You know, reflect on how much joy it actually brings you. I don't like that. I didn't like that color. And oh, there we go. That's better. I'm going to add this here. So when this gets finished and I add my other layers and the ink, I'm going to cut these out, fussy cut like we have done in the past. Maybe 1/4 of an inch. Give it a little 1/4 of an inch of a border. That's why I did not fussy cut this one, because I didn't want edges. I wanted it to just be part of the background. And take the time to write on the back or even on the front if you've made it that way. It's your design. You do what you want with it. But go ahead and write down. You could even write the story. Write the date from the thing that it came from if you happen to know or whatever. It's just a nice way to honor it, to remember things. And don't forget to get out today. I hope you've enjoyed the new light and the new stand. And I hope that you will share your design once you're finished with it. I'm going to cut these out and put them on here. And I will share mine as well. So, you guys have a wonderful day. And I will see you soon. All right. Bye-bye.